think you mentioned something about calling out things when they are wrong. Like, what are how have you guys done that? Like for us in the Pacific, to call that out publicly is kind of not encouraged or not done. So I just wanted to know, what are some examples?
If I just go back to explain the situation, so we had Sandpaper Gate, which was where the ball was sandpapered by one of the players. What actually happened was the captain actually saw or heard what was going on, and the captain of the Australian cricket team said, "I don't know what you're doing, but I don't know anything about it." He was suspended for a year for that, the fact that he didn't actually do something about that. So it's about making people aware of, first of all, identifying where something's wrong. And then it's about teaching them that it's okay, fine. And a lot of sports around the world now are actually having anonymous whistleblower lines. In a lot of the soccer games now and in international football tournaments, the FIFA have what they call a red button. So when they see something that's going wrong, they hit the red button and they can make an anonymous report. So there's multiple levels to it. It's about building, making people feel comfortable that they can report when something goes wrong, but also having other mechanisms where you can actually have anonymous reporting. So a lot of the Australian sports now have anonymous, third-party managed integrity hotlines, where if a player knows that something's about to happen, or if they find themselves in a situation where there's integrity concerns, they can ring that confidential line and their identity is protected. So there's a handbook that's just been released by the UNODC, which is looking about reporting mechanisms in sport, and it was specifically about this, about making anonymous or identifying anonymous reporting channels for sportsmen, women, athletes, coaches, administrators. So there's two-pronged really. It's about promoting that culture of reporting. And I think the best example of that culture of reporting is in airlines and pilots, where this whole culture of, when you see something, if something goes wrong and you're involved in it, they actually promote that culture of reporting because it's about protecting everyone. So industries have done it, so it is possible to do. So we're good. You maybe look at those other industries, but for the moment, we've got these anonymous reporting lines that can help.
Just wanted to ask, in terms of you've named the main contributors to NCDs in terms of physical inactivity, tobacco and alcohol. I wanted to ask you about food types, in terms of food security, when we're addressing the issues of youth health risks. Does that come into the equation in terms of NCDs?
Yeah, sorry if I forgot that one. So yes, I mean the four main risk factors are the diet, the physical inactivity, the smoking, and the alcohol. There are obviously others as well, but they're the main ones. So I mean, I think for each of the risk factors has its own challenges in terms of trying to tackle them. I think the big one for the food area for the Pacific Islands is the food insecurity issues and the cost and availability of the healthier diets, which continue to be a challenge. So the kind of strategy for improving diet is similar in a way to the one for physical activity, which is you have to change the environment as well as change people's preferences and what they want to do. If we don't have the right foods available at the right price, then we can't really expect education to have an impact. So it has to be both.
And would the promotion of use of traditional foods, natural foods, be part of that long-term strategy?
Definitely, because I mean, in reality, if people can at least rely partially on locally produced food, this makes this increases the access and year-round availability. So I think that's a big push from all of the agencies around trying to increase the reliance on local foods as opposed to the processed foods and imported ones. Yeah.
I don't think I need the mic. All right, go ahead.
I I think the challenge is always the data. So in the Pacific, I mentioned we have some data from the NCD surveys and so on, but we're quite limited in other data. Those are really our only source on physical inactivity and physical environments. There haven't been any of those sorts of assessments about walkability and things like that. There also haven't been the cost of NCD studies done in most of the Pacific Island countries. Only a few have done that. So I think if we have more data, then they would include it. But I'm often having a conversation with my colleagues at HQ and regional office about where's the Pacific, and they go, you haven't got enough data. You've only got one time point, or, I mean, it's something that we're constantly working on. So the situation will gradually improve, I hope, yes. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Wendy. One more? Minister.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm not sure whether we can go back to her presentation. I'm interested in the findings on this comparative table on the push or lack of physical activity. And understand that I wanted to know what the population, which target group you were.
The graph that I showed was around insufficient physical activity in adolescents, so defined as 13 to 17-year-olds, against the indicator for this, which is that there's insufficient physical activity in that age group according to the WHO guidelines, which is for at least 60 minutes a day. One you're referring to?
That's the one, yes.
Yes, so this is insufficient physical activity in adolescents based on that. There are a couple of more recent time points than that, but the reports haven't been published yet, so I haven't included those. There's a more recent survey for Vanuatu, but it's not quite published yet, so there will be a more recent update of that source of data.
Okay. I'm concerned because that concerns the school age group, you know?
Yes.
And how recent is this survey conducted?
So it's up to each country. We support the country when they request it, so you can do it as often as you like. Most countries do it around every 3 to 5 years. As I said, Vanuatu has just done one, finished in 2018, so the report's drafted, they're just finalizing it, and so and there's Solomon's is about to do another one in next year, and so on. So countries repeat them as and when they're ready to do so. But the important thing is that you would hope to see some changes in the right direction in that time period. But yeah.
Thank you.
So this is just a questionnaire-based survey. There's no physical measurements done. No, not a physical activity. WHO at the moment is trialing the incorporation of accelerometers in its adult survey.
How reliable is the analysis?
Well, I mean, you know, a question, the thing is you use the same questions in every country, just tailored in terms of language and so on. So they should be comparable between countries and within countries over time. Of course, there's always some challenges in terms of how people answer the questions. And that's why at the moment we only have tools that are available from 12 years and up, because trying to assess physical activity or other things in younger children is much more difficult for them to answer the question correctly.
Go ahead. What would you recommend to remedy this? You know, we've identified the problems. How can we address this?
I mean, clearly it's starting from a young age, the physical inactivity, that you have a section of the population who are starting from a young age to be physically inactive. And then it's continuing throughout their life. So I do think it's a combination of the literacy that we spoke about earlier, and also about improving the accessibility and availability of places where people can be physically active as well. You know, sporting availability, physical active, people can go cycling or walking or swimming or whatever else it is. And in some countries as well, certainly for women, more of the culture around women taking part in physical activity and sports can be an issue.
I think the common themes that we identified from the discussion this afternoon, one was around the policy development and integration, and how it is important to include key stakeholders when actually developing your sports policy. And that includes even the physical activity policy. I was discussing with you, Mr. Wanibuka, during lunchtime, how important that physical education is for every education sector. We used to do that in school. We talk about NCDs and improving NCDs, reducing the level of NCDs, and yet we are not physically active, okay, in those particular space. I remember during my primary and intermediate school, it was a compulsory to have physical education at school. And that's why most of us in that particular year or during my era became good sports people. And there was not much heard about NCD issues, okay? So again, where do we want to go? Okay, do we want to go back there? That is the big question, okay? So should we involve stakeholders again to look at prioritizing physical education activity back in the schools? Because we look at those numbers, we look at the research done, we need to bed that down and identify it from the very early stages. I don't know, this is just for our discussion, okay? Because if we can take that down to the schools, improve the NCDs, of course, okay? You don't have to worry about it at that level because it's in the system, okay? They will look after themselves. A healthy body gives you a healthy mind and also becoming productive in the workplace. Lifelong, to become good sportsmen, to become good sports administrators, to be good at the work that we do, we need to consider that as well. Very important, to look after the well-being of a particular person. So physical activity in schools, yes, I think it's important for this discussion. We talk about good policies, how do you join them? Okay, I think, again, involving collaboration, better coordination, okay, from key stakeholders, be inclusive is the way to go. I just shared this with a few of the participants. The Fiji policy, it went through, including the anti-doping, it went through to cabinet and came back, and then we realized that there was something missing. What was that? We realized that the few stakeholders who were big owners of sports facilities, they were not part of it. So I took it back. I told my team, take it back. Go for another round. Go and talk to the stakeholders because you can't just play sports. You play in these facilities. Is those facilities have access to disabilities? Okay? Do they have that access? Is it user-friendly? Safety of the child when they come and play in the stadiums. Safety of the people. Occupational health and safety issues. So these are the important key elements that need to be part of the policies. The increase in collaboration and coordination in the work that we do when we're developing policies is very important. Integrity of sports, huge. It's a new contemporary space. A lot of us in the Pacific don't realize that whatever we're doing has compromised the integrity of sports. I've come from a sports background where there's heaps. Talking about my friend, we know fixed games in football. There's a lot of that, okay? We don't realize that these things were happening, but you were compromising the sport. Okay? It's an important one. If we need clean sports, we got to make sure that integrity of sports is the main forte around sports activities and in the policy. And that is a space where we are moving into, the government of Fiji is moving into, and I'm sure that everyone else will support the integrity of sports platform. With those few words, I'll call on Jackie to come forward and conclude the session this afternoon. Thank you.